Ugh. Yo, what's up? I hope you are doing great. I hope you are fantastic. And yeah, I hope you're alive. Oh, had a lot of rain here lately. I'm sorry about all the noise. I'm sorry about all the noise. I know it's crazy. I heard one of the videos that I posted, just the wind noise. I'm just trying to make these videos as simple as possible. For me, I do this stuff for a living. I work on movies, documentaries, and commercials, so I can overcomplicate things really easy. And I'm trying not to do that. And I have like a whole style that I like doing. Very dark, moody, depressing. I want to do a video, not this one, but maybe a little bit later, of some of the habits that have, besides running, that have been getting me through this lonely chapter, where my life is falling apart. But I wanted to just kind of share my story, not my origin story, like, my parents and all that stuff, but more of like the moment in my life where everything changed. I don't want to make it too long and drawn out. We can get into it a little bit more, but I'm a first generation American. My parents immigrated here in the 80s. Not going to get too much into that, but they went through a lot. Unfortunately, they had a series of unfortunate events that then kind of launched them into poverty and drug abuse to cope with all the shit that they were going through. Doesn't make it okay, right? None of that. My aunts and uncles did very well for themselves. My father was headed in that path. I was born in 90, and so in that time, both my mom and my father had struggled and suffered a lot. My mom has 2 older kids with someone else, but I never knew that until I was like 13. So I grew up pretty poor. I remember, the only really good meals we would eat sometimes, was during school. I got free lunch, and but my mom, she made miracles happen. She went and got donated food from churches, local churches and stuff like that. And, the house we grew up in didn't have running water, but we just made do with what we had. Later on, that house ended up being condemned by the city of Houston, just with how, shitty it was. But it was normal, right? It was normal. And, for my father, it's like, oh, this isn't as bad as Mexico. And, he grew up in a small village, didn't get electricity until the 70s. So 60s or 70s, something like that. So for him, it wasn't that bad. But yeah, so we grew up in that situation, and we moved into a house in a neighborhood on the northwest side of Houston, and is a not like a horrible neighborhood. It wasn't like Acres Homes or stuff like that, but it was pretty bad for the northwest side. We had our drug dealers, our crackheads, and our shootings and stuff like that. It wasn't as bad as other places, but it wasn't great. And in that school is where I started, to kind of make, pretty bad choices, bad relationships growing up. I went from second grade, to that elementary school, and lived in that neighborhood until we got, until after high school. I moved out, and I went to go live with anyways, so I moved out of that, and then my parents ended up losing the home, the car, everything. But I grew up hanging out with the wrong crowd, and I was just like, I was, I was a pretty angry kid, really angry. I think at my parents for letting us be in the situation. My sister struggling with drugs, and I was just angry. And I don't know if you can hear me or not, but sorry if you can't. And I just began. They put me on Adderall. Because I was having a really hard time in school, and I think that kind of just really opened my mind and like caused me to just kind of like focus and hone in on like what was going on. And I started doubling my meds, and I started doing all this stuff, and I started to realize and thinking like, man, I don't want to be poor. And so I thought to myself like, man, I'm behind in school. I failed 3rd grade. I need to get ahead. I need to fix the situation that I'm in. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to summer school and I'll catch up and I'll try and do all this stuff. And I'm in middle school at this time. And this is just kind of like my way of solving this problem, right? I'm 11, 12 years old. Same age my son is right now. And I'm on this medicine, and I think to myself, man, I need to go to summer school. Well, how much is summer school, right? It's like $100, $200, something like that. I told my parents about it, and my mom basically shut it down and told me that she wasn't paying for that shit. And that had its own, effect on me. And I thought to myself, well, my parents aren't gonna help me with this, and I need to figure this out on my own. And so the thing that I turned to in the neighborhood that I was in, which was pretty easy, was to sell drugs. And so at the age of 12, my sister was sleeping with this guy, or boyfriends with this guy that dealt a lot of drugs. So I approached him and I let him know that I wanted to learn the game. And so he fronted me my first QP. So he basically invested in my startup and, basically covered my supply cost up front and allowed me to pay him in time. And he gave me really trash supply. And but me and him connected, and he wanted to teach me, and he wanted, he saw where I was going. And I know this is like super foreign to so many people, but this was just my reality, right? And to me, this was normal. And so I started to break down this 1/4 pound of drugs, and I began selling it, and I began to have like a reputation, as being a dealer. And I hung out with this crew, and I was like the smallest guy in the crew, but I was like the crazy one, right? I was the wild card. I was just at a point where I just didn't care. I was just so angry, right? And so I think that's why I didn't go that far on the deep end during this divorce, because it scared me where I could get so fast. Like it just, a matter of months, it can get drastically fast when I take matters into my own hands. And so I knew I didn't want to do that again. And so at this point, I'm 12, I'm selling weed. People are like knocking on my door. I made this box and metal shop to keep all my money and my drugs in. And I hid it in a compartment in my closet. So it was like behind the wall, because my parents and my siblings would steal stuff from me. It was just not a safe place. We had relatives and stuff living with us too. At any point we had like 9 people living with us, 11. It was crazy. So my uncle would sleep in the garage on top of carpet where my dad would keep his carpet supply. We installed carpet. So I started selling this, and then And then I sold cough syrup, so lean. And I was selling ecstasy. And then I started selling cocaine. I remember the first time I was doing cocaine was in my sister's apartment in her bathroom with her husband at the time. I'm 13 years old. I'm doing my first bump of cocaine. And I felt exhilarated. It's like I felt powerful. And I just felt so paranoid. And I'm so glad I didn't keep doing it. That was one of the few times I did it. But I'm so glad I had this desire to like just make money. I didn't want to get addicted to the stuff that I was trying to sell. I wanted to make money. And I'm so glad I didn't fall into that, unfortunately, like a lot of people do. So I'm selling cocaine, 12, 13 years old. And me and my buddies, we have weapons, and some of them are older, like 15, and we're just like crazy. We're just like doing crazy stuff, breaking into homes, vandalizing vehicles. Like it just got really, really crazy really fast. And this is in 6th grade, 7th and 8th. I got my heart broken in 7th grade by this girl that I liked down the street. And so I lost a ton of weight and started working out and all this stuff. And me and my buddies are learning how to cook crack. And I remember it was a summer going into, I think it was like an 8th grade or something like that, before middle school. It was in the summer. This one kid I'm selling cocaine to invites us to a basketball gym, like an indoor gym. Ends up being a church. All my friends go. I've never been very like sporty, athletic or anything like that. And we ended up going, and turns out it was a church. It was a youth group. And I remember that night at 7, they corralled us up to this room upstairs, and they started playing music and about Jesus. And it was just really weird to me because I grew up going to mass or to a Catholic church every time someone died or got baptized, right? It was just, that's it. So, but I ended up hearing a message that really resonated with me, feeling loved and cared for. At that time I had experienced a lot of abandonment. My parents, had to work, and at times, man, they fucking, they left, during, they would leave me at home, go to Atlanta, for one of the school breaks. And I just had to learn how to survive. And, the fact that I started hearing this message about, Jesus and all this stuff like that, really meant, like, I needed to hear that at a time in my life. I have an interesting relationship, with religion. Right now, I'm not by any means saying that I'm virtuous or none of that bullshit. I'm just, I don't want to get into kind of what's going on. I just want to share where I'm at, right? My story. And this is where I was, and this is a group that I needed at that time. And so that summer, I made like a completely 180, flushed my drugs down the toilet, got rid of everything, started reading my Bible, and I started at Genesis. Probably wasn't a good idea. And then my friends slowly stopped talking to me, but they respected me, right? They knew who I was about, and this was Fabian just doing his thing. They kind of knew that when I have my mind set on something, it's kind of like, it's better to let Fabian do his thing and run its course. And so, I got involved in church, and, that was the next, till I was 30 probably. That was the next, 15 years of my life. More than that, but my life completely changed. And what really made me grateful and see is that, we were breaking into homes prior, and, a year later, my friends and an older brother, one of the OGs that we used to hang out with, they broke into a home in Katy. They did an in-home invasion. They tied up a family, and they all got caught and sent to jail, to prison. And one of my friends, he just got out. I still talk with him, had a beer with him a while back. He's on the straight and narrow, but, it's 15 years of his life was gone. 13 years of his life. And I realized that I literally was this close, to it, to that being my story. There's so many things, so many laws that I broke and things that I did where, that should have been me. And it taught me to be grateful. And then my buddy, my dealer that was teaching me the ropes and doing all this stuff, I didn't realize how big of a deal he was, but, he got sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was accused of being the kingpin of South Texas a few years after our relationship had started. And I was, this guy was teaching me everything and taking me under his wing. I'm not sure what could have turned up, on that. And I just think in retrospect, it's insane to me. I still mentor at my old high school and my middle school, and I share my story often because I want these kids to know that I see myself in them. So it's a selfish thing. I want to be understood, right? But I want these kids to know that there's more to life. They might be overwhelmed with the things that are going on right now. And this is the thing I'm trying to tell myself now too. I might be overwhelmed with my problems right now, but man, life is so much bigger than what's going on. And we need to stay present and not be overwhelmed and overtaken by the things that we're going through, but just allow them to flow by us like water. And then I'm privileged because I get to do, documentaries now with law enforcement and FBI and, all this stuff like that. And it's just so crazy how it's one choice literally could have had me on the other side of this, right? Instead of someone that's getting to tell stories, someone that is getting a story told about them because of the horrible choices they made in life and, the federal cases they caught and, things like that. And I understand, like, I'm fortunate. I'm alive. My knee hurts a little bit right now, but man, I'm realizing more. And maybe it's just the dopamine from, the last 20% of my run that I just did. But man, life's a gift, and we have to make the most of it. So I'm gonna stop my story here. This is long, probably one of the longer ones I've done. I'm sorry, but I'm not. But yeah, so we'll continue afterwards on kind of what happened after church, and the next phase, and we'll get into it. But I appreciate you guys listening. Don't give up. Don't let them have the last laugh. Keep going. You have what it takes, man, and you're needed. You're valued. I love you. Bye.